Right, so I'm going to give this for Mom so she knows where we are. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Outside the Box. And if you're watching this on video, you can see I'm with a familiar face. If you're listening on the podcast, I'm about to tell you a very familiar name. I'm with Jamie Winship today. And Jamie, how's it going, man?
It's going well. Yeah, really, really well. Interesting days.
Well,
It's good to be here with you.
Well, for one, I as always, I really appreciate when you take the time out of your day to talk with me, and I'm just so glad and grateful that we get to record these conversations so that more people can be a part of them. And today's we're kind of going to go a little all over the place today, but I want to start with the idea of rejection. And will you first just tell me, like, what is your definition of rejection? Is that like is it like an actual thing? Is it just a feeling? When I say rejection, what do you think?
That rejection means, to me, it means that you have no value, that you have no value or worth, and therefore we whoever reject who you are. I mean, it's a very painful rejection. It's a very painful, deep sense in a human being. But that would be my takeaway. Is if I say they rejected me, that would be, I would come away with the sense of I didn't have anything of value to offer to whatever it is I was attempting to engage in.
So it seems like there's no real in between, like, because sometimes I feel like getting rejected can be kind of a small thing, yet hurt a little bit, but it wasn't a huge deal to me, but still probably subconsciously I'm still thinking I have zero worth in this scenario.
Right. And you're right. It's like lots of stuff that we talk about. It's how much weight, how much value or sense of identity do you take from the rejection? If you don't view the rejection as, oh, that means that I have no value, then it doesn't have a lot of impact, and it shouldn't. But for most people, when they're using that word rejection, they rejected me, it's a deeper sense of, like, I didn't bring any value to whatever this is I'm doing. But the healthier we are, and if we don't get our identity from other people or situations, then we can handle the fact that something didn't work out, which is different than rejection. Like, it didn't go, it didn't work. We offered, it wasn't accepted. Okay, we're going to move on. Then it should just be a learning experience and positive versus rejection.
Yeah. One thing that's kind of interesting, and one reason it kind of prompted this topic I wanted to talk about with you is a lot of times I feel like when you look at, quote unquote, successful people, I feel like a lot of it had to do with their ability to deal with rejection.
Yes.
And, some of that might have been, they have a deeper belief in themselves or a deeper belief in what they're doing.
Right.
So the rejection doesn't hurt as bad. Is that kind of what you've seen dealing with?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things we're working on right now is we're developing like a strategy to work, to try and stop human trafficking. And so one of the guys that's working with us, he said that when you run into barriers, and he was just talking about in like trying to end a criminal enterprise, when you run into barriers, the key to resolving it is to back up a little bit, move into, this is his words, it was interesting, contemplation, which results in innovation, and then go back at the barrier, go back at the obstacle. And so when you think about, if you're talking about something like we're going to try this and our effort was rejected, So a healthy, whole person would back up and say, okay, let's consider, how does that make us feel? What happened? And then, okay, and that didn't work. So what's a new way we can go attempt the thing again? And this is what, successful people do, is they realize, as this fellow said, he said, we could create 500 prototypes knowing beforehand 400 are going to fail. We know that. So we don't get value or identity from that didn't work, right? So we just realized, okay, that didn't work. Okay, so we're going to set that aside. We're going to figure out why that didn't work, and then we're going to try something new or different, innovate, and that keeps us joyful. It keeps us moving forward, so that we don't get, oh, that didn't work. We're no good. We're failures. Let's stop. This can never be done. Very different response.
Yeah, I love that. It reminds me of, I've heard you talk a lot about how you go from the, what's the way you've put it? It's where you go into the kind of the dreaming brain.
Yeah,
and
intuitive, yeah.
Intuitive, and then back into the practical.
Right.
So,
Yes.
and you got to have like a dance between the two.
Right.
And so are you saying that, say something, an idea is rejected or you're rejected, is that a sign that you need to change something, or could it be like it's not for them?
Both. Exactly. That's a great way to think about it. That's part of the contemplative part, or the intuitive part, is to back up and go, what happened there? What happened there? And it could be like, this isn't the right place to even be. These are the wrong people to work with. This is the wrong situation. I don't belong in this situation. It could be that. Or it could be, we need to come at this same thing in a different way. Yeah. Here, I'll give you an example. So I went a long time ago, when I wanted to, write a book and publish a book. I went to a big, expensive writers conference, and if you pay enough money, you can talk to 3 publishers. And when this is years ago, and when I would walk into the room, there was a publisher sitting there, and the assistant had a stopwatch, and you had 2 minutes. Go pitch your book idea in 2 minutes. Well, I'd never done this before, so I went in there. Then I sat down. I didn't know they timed you. I didn't know you had to be able to say anything in 2 minutes. And they're like, what's your book about? And I said, well, it's the story of, and they're like, no. and so it was over. Like, that was like, thank you for coming. You're out. So when I left, there's no one there to debrief with or anything. It's like, wow. And so you are forced to like kind of go inward and like, what was that? Like, what was that? And then later I found someone to talk to, and they said, look, if you can't say what your book's about in 2 minutes, you don't know what it's about. So then I was like, oh, now I could go out and say, I'm a failure. This is not going to work, and pull identity out of that rejection. But they didn't reject me, right? They didn't reject me. That what they were saying was, don't come in here unless you actually know what your book is about. So then by the next meeting, I could say what my book was about in 2 minutes. So next meeting, and I'm afraid and fearful and nervous. Ready, go in. The guy goes, what's your book about? And I could say it in 2 minutes. And then that publisher goes, yeah, we don't want that idea. Boom, out the door. Okay, so now it's a different thing, right? But it got better. Like, we improved. And then, so by the third guy, I realized, oh my gosh, don't just pitch this idea anywhere. Like, pitch it to the right person, the right publisher, and so each one was a rejection, but I didn't, each one was like, okay, whoa, what did we just learn there? Now, if deep within me is this identity, I'm a writer, I'm going to be that, you'll do that 5,000 times until you get it. If that's not the truth of who you are, you won't stay with it, right? You'll give up. So.
I want to go deeper into that, but just, for the people on YouTube, I got to say, he did in fact publish his book. And if you guys have not read Living Fearless, you have to read it. The start of the book, you say, try to read in one sitting, the way that you would listen to a 10-hour lecture. I haven't been able to do that, but my goal is like one Saturday. I'm just gonna bust out with my
It's probably
notebook.
too much pressure. It's probably too much pressure. Yeah.
But I really liked what you said. Like there's different types of rejections, and you mentioned, as long as you're not pulling identity out of that rejection,
right,
it allows you to take a step back and consider what's happening, and then reapproach.
Right.
So you said, if deep in your identity is I'm a writer, or replace that with anything, you're going to keep going up to bat. Tell us, is that the only sign, or is that one of the best signs that we're on the right path? If we're getting rejected, and yet I can't seem to get that out of my head. I know that I want to be a writer. I know that this book needs to be out in the world.
Yes.
Will you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's really a great question too, because when I'm talking to younger people and they say, I want to be whatever they want to be, my question to them is, do you lay awake at night thinking about that? Like, does that keep you up at night? Because if it doesn't, that's okay. It's just, but it's, so that's not necessarily a deep identity driven goal. So it's just there. I feel like if it's coming from the truth of who I am, however I'm going to whatever vocation I'm going to express the truth of who I am. Yeah. It's like, I'm going to die if I don't have the opportunity to engage in, offering my identity to the world in this form or fashion. Yeah. I think that's really important. And I think that's what, I think Paul Newman said it, he said, show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser. Right. That idea. Well, some of that's true, but like what's interesting about that book that you just held up, published by Baker Publishing is one of the publishers I talked to that day. It was 30 years ago.
No way.
And Baker was the third one that I got with, and where I did it in 2 minutes, and I thought they were the right people. And the publisher at the time, he said to me, let me see your first 3 chapters. So you have to be ready. So I gave him the first 3 chapters. They read the chapters, and he wrote me a handwritten note back in the day, 30 years ago, which took time. And he did it, and he sent it to me, and he said, you are a good writer. You just don't know what you really want to say. So he said, when you know what you really want to say, come back. So 30 years later, I went back. Why 30 years later? Because that's how deep that was in me. Like 30 years ain't going to take it away. It just, I wrote a lot in those years in between, but it was very beautiful. The truth about life is that the invitation of life into you being all who you're supposed to be never goes away. It never goes away. And so that's why you keep going, because the invitation is still there if it's coming from the depth of who you are. So yeah, I love asking people in good trainers I've had in my life have said to me, they've asked me that question in similar ways. Does that identity leave you according to circumstance? And if it needs to always be there. Even when we were taking our first assignment, being sent into a cross-cultural situation, my supervisor and that said, hey, this is the challenge. This is the situation. When I give you this challenge, do you wake up at night consumed with trying to figure out how to do this challenge? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, then you're the one we want. But if I said, no, I'm going there because the salary's great, they're like, or it has good benefits. Yeah, they would be like, it's a good question. And most people, I don't know if they're thinking about that.
Do you think, I think a lot of us are, we guard ourselves from that, I'm trying to think of a better word, but I can't right now. It's obsession,
Hmm.
like, because when you lay up awake at night and you can't go to sleep and you care about something so much, there's a lot of risk to that. Like, say, like, for instance, if it takes you 30 years to be a writer, you know, uh, like, how do we not be afraid of that all-consuming type of obsession over something?
Yeah.
Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, now we come back to the other thing we were talking about before, balance, right?
Yeah.
Balance. So that passion, let's use the word passion, that driving passion, like we can say we're obsessed with it or it's the primary thing we think about. So then the way you balance it out is like, I'll do anything it takes to do that. I'll sacrifice myself, I'll sacrifice my family. That's wrong. That's out of balance. It's like, what are the things I can do in the present tense that can move that passion forward, move that goal forward? So if I want to, write a major work one day, what are you doing today? How is that passion, obsession being worked out in the present tense? And when it's imbalance, you can say, well, I'm writing 1,000 words a day in the time I allot for this, and then I spend time with my family, and you see the balance, but that passion is always included in the mix of the day. And we can say, here's the steps I'm taking to to pursue that passion forward.
I love it. You mentioned the 1,000 words a day, and
Mhm.
my mindset's very much along those lines, like having like a small regular target,
Right.
versus like, because then you could obsess over something and not do anything.
Right.
It,
It's counterproductive, right?
right,
Yeah.
because all you can think about is what you're wanting, and but when you can break that what you're wanting into little bites,
Right.
it's probably it's using that passion or obsession in a way that that is useful and less vulnerable to the consequences of rejection mentally.
Yes, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah. So if my son says, he came to me when he was in sixth grade and says, I want to be a famous skateboarder. And I said, do you have a skateboard? And he said, no. I said, well, we know how to start this process. Right. Yeah. It's not like you just dream at night of getting the gold medal. You start, you begin. And the people that are serious, they'll do it. They'll start and they'll do this and this and they're not freaked out about it. But it is a driving deep passion to them. And for in anything, like if you're talking to Gandhi about peace, I mean, it consumes him to see a peace movement. So it's not just about I started a company or wrote a book or became an actor, but anyone that's in any vocation where they've brought their identity into the vocation as the driver, it has deep passion and they will pursue it unto death. Like that's the level of their commitment to it, but they're not out of balance. They're very balanced people.
It really seems like rejection can be a signal that you're in your identity, that you're on the right path, just based on your innate response to it.
Yes, right. Yeah, exactly. Well said. Yeah. And I would say even stronger that in the truth of who I am moving towards whatever it is that I believe I've been invited into, there's no such thing as rejection. Like there's failure, there's we didn't get that didn't work. But to use that word rejection, probably not the right word. Probably rejection to me is more like my body rejected the new kidney. There's not like we're coming at it again with the same kidney. That's over. It's done. That's rejected. It's over. That's not happening. That's not the word we want to use in these human interactions. Like it's a bad word to use, I think, because we pull identity. I am rejected. I am rejected. Or do you feel rejected? And if someone says, yeah, I do feel rejected, then that we want to work on that feel. We want to work on that. Like, that's not a word. That's not a word we accept, that word.
So, you said human interaction, and it makes me think about relationships. And ask a girl or a guy out, they say no. Somebody leaves you. A close friend turns on you in some way. Um, what type of rejection is that? And I would imagine that that's not the same type of rejection in terms of like it being a signal you're onto something.
Yeah. 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 Again, it's that thing where how much, what weight what's your takeaway from that, whatever just happened? So if if a person says, I don't want to be with, I mean, and this is real life stuff, and we have to deal with these kinds of things. It could be a life partner that all of a sudden says, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. Um, uh, what's fascinating about those kinds of conversations, or you're asking a girl out, or whoever your partner is, and that person says no, or even if they're strong, like, I don't like you, if your whole world is you consumed with thinking about yourself, then you become the reference point to everything that happens, which is really unfair and not smart, because it's another human being that's saying what they're saying. And so if I was really other focused like I should be, my interest would be in the welfare of the other person more than myself. And so if this person says, hey, I don't like you, I don't want to be with you, my concern would be, I wonder, not in me, not like what's wrong with me. It's like, wow, okay, I'm going to respect their decision. And I wonder, like, if it's someone, I mean, because I was doing this yesterday with a friend, it's like, if your life partner says, I don't want to be with you anymore, something's happening in them, like, and out of concern and real love, we should be like asking the other person, like, are you okay? What can I do for you? How can I help you? Not like, wow, I'm rejected. Oh, it's all about me, and it's on me, and now I'm rejected and it hurts me. And I think that takes away a lot of the pain, is being other focused. So even if I ask this girl out and this girl says no, it's like, am I interested in the value and the future of that other person? And then okay, then let them go. It's okay. Like, I'm not the right person for them, however they perceive that. But I'm not going to pull out identity, something's wrong with me, out of it. It is so egotistical to make yourself the reference point of everything that happens, because you actually don't really know why the other person is saying that. I told one of my coworkers the other day, was talking about an employee that we have, saying, this employee thinks this. And I said, don't say what another person thinks. You don't know. You do not know what they think. Don't guess what's in another person's head. It's a dangerous game, because you could be completely wrong, and then you start attaching other emotions and feelings to it, and you actually don't know, unless you sit with them and say, tell me what you want me to know about this situation. You don't know. So again, that's like, I think this, it's too dangerous to think that way. It's easier to say, wow, okay, that person doesn't want me with them. Okay, what's going on in that person? What's going on in them? And can I be a help to that? Can I be like, it just saves from pulling this identity of, I'm valueless, I'm unimportant, I'm hurtful, all those false identities out of that.
It's interesting how easy it is to, you mentioned, self-reference points and having yourself be the reference point. It's so easy to get into self-protective mode in any of these scenarios.
That's right.
And, because, if you get rejected by, someone that you like or want to have a relationship with, you're going to take it as there's something wrong with me, because
That's right. Mm-hmm.
you clearly, want to be with them, and if we can somehow get rid of this looking inward and looking outward, which is what we've talked a lot about with identity,
Right.
then it's hard to get rejected.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. You probably never really can. We know things don't work out. I mean, that's the truth about life. Things don't work out. We know that. And not every relationship's going to work. We know this. What's funny is how devastated we are when that reality happens, even though we know it's a reality and it can happen and it does happen. And, it can be painful and all that, but it's like we've also talked about earlier. It's like going into a boxing ring, because you've been training in boxing, but never with a real opponent. And you go in there and the real opponent hits you right square in the face, and you stop and you go, wait, and you come back to your trainer like, wow, that guy hit me. He's like, this is boxing. Like, so in real life, in real relationship and relational, man, there's people that don't want to be with you, and there's people that love to be with you. And like, so why are we so confounded by it when it happens as it truly does happen? What we have to, I think what protects us in all of this going on is that what ultimately prevails is the good. Like, that's what saves us. That's what rescues us. Is what ultimately prevails is love, is the good. And so I ask people all the time, do you think the universe is for you or against you? If it's against you, boy, you're going to have a hard time, because you're going to perceive everything as, there it is against me, there it is against me. And so you've already got the rejection mentality in play already. And this is what happens when people are struggling with rejection. They've gained that rejection identity already early in their life, and they're just reaffirming it. It's being reaffirmed to them as they go along. But if you grew up in a world that's like, yeah, not everyone's going to like you, but man, lots of people will. So it's okay. You come into it, you're not shocked when someone says, I don't really want to hang around with you. Like, okay. But the people that really I do want to hang around with are there, and we will find each other. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just, it's amazing to me how, because if I can go back in time, and you can, like we all can go back to those moments where, someone rejected us in some way, and, in a relational setting, and I can put myself in shoes of others who I'm very close to, and those feelings that they were feeling when they got rejected. And, it really does feel like a life threat, like I don't know, like things are going really wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And you can quickly go into this. You can quickly get out of the mentality of the universe is working for you, and go quickly into everything's working against me.
That's right. So easy, because it's so easy to believe that kind of stuff. Yeah. Like you're saying, like, this person rejects me, and we feel like it's a life sentence, right? Like, this is the way it's always going to be. As soon as you believe that lie, you're in big trouble. That's serious trouble. And so we need practices and friends and community that help prevent us from getting into that rut of believing that kind of thing, because it's not true. You and I have talked about, the whole cosmos is about life and being alive, and all death leads to rebirth. Dying stars lead to new galaxies. Like, it's the whole thing is built. Whatever you believe about God or anything, just watching this amazing thing function in the universe, it's all about life, death, birth, reborn, and it continues. Right. So the idea that this thing is sentenced just to be a nasty end is like, there's no real proof of that. The only proof we have is like, well, this is really about life, and about some things dying so new things can grow. And so if you have that larger mentality, it's like, this relationship I mean, I said this to one of my friends the other day who was going through a really difficult relational time. I said, I'm just going to tell you something, not because I'm super faithful or spiritual, just because I've been alive for 62 years and I know I've seen this rhythm. 1 year from now, we're going to be talking about how you're okay. As bad as this is, and it's not good, it's bad, and we all know it's bad and it's painful and it's terrible. But I know how life rhythms go, and it is a season that will end unless you determine that you're going to remain in it.
And I'm actually really glad you ended that way, because part of me feels like, and I can relate at times, that you kind of want to sit in the rejection a little bit. You
Sure.
want to, you know what? I'm going to go to the bar tonight because, I'm feeling down, and that sounds like a good plan,
Yeah.
and I feel like, if like you knew, just like you mentioned with your friend, is that the way to talk to loved ones that have been rejected, who, because I think in the past, the way I've done it is, I've kind of wallowed with them and said, man, this sucks, and
Yeah.
because a lot of times people don't hear this is the life rhythm. I know that in a year,
Right.
we're going to be talking about something different. It's hard to
Mhm.
hear that. I know that
Sure.
in my own life,
That's right.
I've been through moments where I wouldn't have heard that.
Right. Yeah. So you want to, yeah, you don't want to, when a person's in pain, you want to just sit with them in their pain. Like, absolutely great. That you're exactly right about that. You don't go in and lecture them and tell them it's all,
Right.
no, you don't want to do that. No, you sit with them in your pain. And as you're embracing them in their pain, because we're human, like all of us know what it feels like to be rejected. We all know it. We know humans weren't made to be rejecting one another or to be rejected by. We're made to be in community, to belong, like to attach. We're all made for that. When it doesn't happen, it produces pain, and it should, because we should never settle for isolation and introspection and all that stuff. So it hurts us. So when we're hurt, it's like, when you skin your knee, it's like you don't want to sit there with the kid that skinned his knee and saying, this shouldn't hurt, you should be brave, and all that stuff we say. It's like, it hurts. Let's sit. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt really badly for a while. I'm just saying, as a friend, but we're not going to stay in this. We'll sit in this. We'll cry about it. We'll be, when my twin sister's 18-year-old was killed by a drunk driver, it was a lot of sitting and a lot of pain. 2 weeks before graduation, and no parent wants that phone call.
No.
And yeah, and so when we go and sit with her, we just cry with her. That's all we do. We're not trying to figure out what's the good in this and all that stuff. It's just sit and cry and sit and cry and sit and cry and feel the pain. But as it lessens, because of community, and belonging, and like, as it starts to lessen, then it's like we're going to speak against bitterness, and we're going to speak against the lie of, this is because you did something wrong in your life, and this is karma or punishment, or you should have been a better parent. All the stuff that we know as humans, they're going to start to think about. Why did I ever argue with my kid? Why wasn't I nice? Or all these lies that start to come in that just drive you further down into what's not, it's painful and sad, but down into despair, which is deadly. Sadness is a very beautiful emotion, a very human. Let's grieve, let's lament, let's cry together, and then let's try and get well and move forward. But if we get stuck down and like, this is the way it's always going to be, and it's never going to be any good, you're not a good friend if you don't help your friend pull them out of that quagmire, right? So again, it's balance, right? It's balance.
It is totally balanced. And would you say that rejection and loss are like the same feeling?
I think so.
Maybe in obviously different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Do we respond to them the same way?
I think that's a good question. I think that's a great question. If I would have asked, even as a police officer, and when we had to go make death notifications, oh my gosh, it's so hard when you're telling a parent or a loved one or something, I'm sorry to tell you this, but and it's the sense of loss and separation and all the things humans are terrified of, and they should be. But it is a kind of, yeah, it's a loss. But I think if you probably kept asking, do you feel abandoned or rejected? I think deep down there is, by who or what. They may say God, they may say love, but yeah, and that's a real fear, that we are abandoned, and this abandonment is producing loss that can't be recovered.
Well, and I would also think that with some loss, it's easy to get the feeling that you could have done something different or to prevent. And that feeling is almost a rejection in a way, because it's kind of, you're the reference point again. You're turning inward. That's my fault.
Right.
If something
Mhm.
happened, and I keep going back to the what you talk about with being others focused. That seems like that would cure a lot of it or prevent a
Mhm.
lot of that. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah, I'm gonna just tell you what my sister did in this example, because I know lots of parents have had to deal with this. So he was killed by a drunk driver, and so what they did was my brother-in-law, who's a former police officer, retired. He and my sister reached out to the driver and the driver's parents of the drunk driver, and they invited him over, and they told them that they forgave him, and the father of the kid that was driving kept saying, why are you I would never do this if I was you. I would be so mad. Why are you doing this? And it took a situation that it could have been rejection and loss forever in the lives of people, and it brought the good out of it, right?
yeah.
And so they became good friends, and all of that. So what they were trying to do is, like, if we get self-absorbed and self-focused in this thing, it's a downward spiral. But if we can grieve, and in our grief look to the other, look to community, that's what rescues humanity. That's what makes us feel like we're not going to let this turn into rejection and loss and despair, and but we're going to look to the other, and we're going to turn this thing for the good.
I love that. And
Mm.
you've mentioned community quite a bit today,
Yeah.
and obviously in a lot of our conversations, you mentioned the importance of having community. When you've been rejected relationally, I can imagine how your guard would be up by going to community.
Yeah.
Um, how do you um, have like the bravery, the courage, to continue to dive into to community when you know people have let you down, or uh, you've felt rejected,
Yeah.
by others.
It's kind of like, how do what's that? How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. It's like, you want to be building good community in the good days, right? Right, and not
Yeah,
wait for the bad days to wish you had a good community. You want to be building good community in the good days, and so a good community is a community that doesn't preach to one another. They simply be with one another in the truth of who they are. They be, and they help each other discover who they are, and all of that. And so that when the tragedy comes or the pain comes, and it's going to come for all of us, when that when you go into that community, that you don't have to explain yourself. No one's going to counsel you. They're just going to sit around you, and they're going to cry with you, and they're going to just be with you. And that's a good community. And then at the right time to start trying to lift your head up, to start lifting your head back up, they'll do it gently, but only when you're ready for that. And so, yeah, you want to be developing that community right now,
it kind
because
of
it's very hard to find it when you're discouraged.
it
Yeah.
feels like this is in most ways a health and wellness podcast, and I feel like building muscle for your health is very similar to, building community and its importance.
Yes.
They kind of go hand in hand.
Right.
How do you get out of being discouraged? So you're coming out of this rejection state, this feeling of loss, this feeling of like, I'm not enough, I'm wrong, like there's nothing right with me. How do you get out of like that feeling of discouragement and back into others' focus so you can start, building that community around you?
Yeah, I think so. As we've talked about before, number one is to tell the truth, like to tell the truth. So even if I'm alone, I can say, okay, what about this hurts? Like, what hurts about this? Is it that I'm not going to be with that particular person anymore, if that's the kind of rejection we're facing? Or is it that what really hurts about this is I now believe something's wrong with me? Like, is that the truth? So you want to try and tell the truth as much as you can by yourself, into the mirror if you can do it. But you've got to be speaking it outward, and you need the voice of the other, whoever that is, whether it's a person or God or the universe. You need the voice of the other to speak the truth back to you about who in fact you are. Like, you just need that. And so, we did an actors retreat. We've done quite a few out in LA, and I always ask them, how do you deal with just no, 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 no? Like, those are incredibly resilient people, and it's because they still believe deep down inside that they are an actor, no matter what this says or who that says. And if they stop believing that, of course they'll stop going and trying. So either you've got a community, you've got this inner drive, but that's the thing, is to just tell the truth. And that's all I do with people, is just like, tell me the truth about what this makes you believe about yourself. What does it make you believe about the world or people, and just get it out here so you can get some distance between you and that idea, so it's not giving you identity. And then have a way to hear others speak the truth back to you, because we get out of balance in the false. Like, even if just someone comes up and people, if someone cuts you off in traffic and flips you off, like, that can really throw your life out of balance for people. But they don't have anywhere to process it, and it consumes them, and it's like, you need a place to say, oh, this is how that made me feel. And then you have another person that's like, yeah, but maybe that person's just a jerk, or they're, whatever it's their own issue. They don't even know you. So how are you attributing so much weight about who you are from that incident? It's like so self-absorbed, the whole thing. It's like, get out of there, get out, get back out here. But that's what I do. But it has a lot to do with speaking truth, telling truth, and then confession, and then someone speaking truth back to you about what's actually true.
Is speaking the truth, is that what creates the space?
Yes.
Okay, because it's a common theme I'm hearing from you, is creating this space from certain beliefs,
Yes.
or things that have happened, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you keep mentioning truth tell right there, and what I'm taking from that is the truth telling is kind of the space maker in a way, because if you create space, it seems like you can kind of go back into the intuitive and the practical,
right?
Because you're not so. It's funny how easy it is to get self-absorbed. It's so close to all this stuff.
Yeah.
But
no, that's really right. I had a younger guy that I'm friends with, and he's very interested in this young woman, and it was like great. It was awesome. And then he was telling me, he said, yeah, she broke up with me. And I was like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, that's the right response. I'm sorry. Like, as a human being, I'm sorry, because I know you liked her and she liked you. And then he was telling me what happened. And, he said, I was talking to her and we got in a discussion over some political thing, and she didn't like my view of it. And then, and it caused this kind of, and she decided that she didn't want to continue. Well, when I hear something like that, I'm like, I'm glad that ended. You know what I mean? It was like, wow, because, but for him, that's not the thing to say. But in
Right.
my mind, I think, and I'm much older than him, and I'm like, wow, like if that would separate you and her, that's like not a good situation anyway. So there's always this value in it. Like, there's, the universe has a way of like trying to keep things that don't belong together from being together. It has a way of doing that. And from the universe is tilted so that right relationships do come together. That's the way the whole thing is built. And so when something doesn't come together and you're trying to nail it together, it's probably going to break down on you at some point, right? And so we just need to pay attention to these very beautiful rhythms and stop saying, well, that means I'm a jerk, or she's a jerk, or we're a jerk. Like, stop pulling that kind of identity. It's like, that didn't happen. Okay, it didn't happen. We're sad. Let's do it again. Like, let's figure it out. And what did we learn? And like, let's go forward.
I think I just believe in that so much in terms
Mhm.
of like relationally. Could it also be said that for that struggling actor, for that struggling athlete that keeps getting said no to, or that keeps losing, is that the universe telling them change lanes? Like, how do you know?
I would, yeah. So, yeah. So my question to a person is, okay, like, this is who I am, and I'm moving towards this, and this doesn't seem to be happening. So then so my question to them is, okay, this is your identity, and you see that identity worked out in this vocation. That's really all it is, in this vocation, and that's not happening. What about your identity makes you lean towards this vocation, but it's actually deeper than that vocation? It's actually something here. Like, let's keep going and explore it, because you went here, that didn't work. So it's not like, forget all that. It's like, but what's the deeper drive that this actually isn't it? It's even deeper than that. I just had a conversation before I came on with you with a person, and that's what they came to while we were talking. Oh, it's not this job because that job didn't work out. What's in that job that you're really looking for that actually isn't in that job? And we just kept talking. I was like, oh, and then it's over here. And then the other thing along the lines is the belief that there's only one way to do something. Like, I want to be whatever. I want to be this, and this is the way you have to go to be that. And like, I'm always like, that could be true. There's maybe 10 other ways to get there that you haven't thought about, and you couldn't get there that way. Okay, what's other ways? So and I think of a lot of people that I've worked with who were telling me, we want to be this and this vocation, we can't get it to work out. And I said, yeah, but that vocation, there's 10 openings for that vocation in Europe. Like, you're only looking on one street. There's a lot of streets. But then they say, well, I'm afraid to live in another country. Okay, let's talk about that then first. Let's talk about that fear, because that fear is closing off your options.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's interesting to watch them move and watch the whole thing just open up too.
What I just heard there was the ability to go into the intuitive, which I've mentioned a couple times today, because I hear you talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of it requires, creating that space so that you can.
Right.
Well, Jamie, man, I know we're running out of time, but I feel like I'm going to do this every time we talk. I'm going to end by asking you to come back on the show.
Yeah, it's
And
fun.
that way I have it on, record that you're coming back on.
Well, it's good for me because everything we're talking about, like I have to apply to my own life, and I have things I'm working on that we've run into dead ends or rejection, or opposition, and it makes me like, yeah, we've got to back up, we've got to get up back up into the intuitive and the imaginative, innovate, and come back again at it. But then that's kind of the game, and that's kind of the fun, is
And
figuring it out.
I think the first time you and I got together, you mentioned, gamifying life to a degree.
Yeah.
It really, it just gets so much better when you're able to do that, and
Right.
learning how to play that game.
Right.
And so anyways, to the listeners out there who've been with us this hour, we really appreciate you. I hope you rewind this, go back. I know I'm going to do this myself. And if you haven't yet, you got to check out Living Fearless. Jamie's book is, I'm rereading it, and I think everyone needs to have that on their bookshelf. So Jamie, man, I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Guys, this has been Outside the Box. I'm your host, Ben Rogers. And as always, we'll see you guys.
Don't go away.